Hi, welcome to our February 5th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. So I'm going to do a quick test to make sure that the audio is kind of going through as expected. Bear with me just for a moment. Hi, welcome to our February. Okay, that sounds like it's coming through just fine. Okay, my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the Hangout today. If you have not attended a Club Cubase Hangout or a Club Cubase live stream, how this is going to work is you could have questions submitted in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or for those attending live, you could actually just enter the comments in the chat field. So the ability for people to ask questions will far exceed the timing of when I could answer them. I'll try to go through all of the different questions chronologically. Sometimes the chat gets way ahead and I may lose a couple of questions. I'm going to apologize in advance for that. We'll try to not let that happen. But so if you want to just ask your questions, if we could try to, if you don't get an immediate response to your question, know that I will try to get to it, but asking the same question over and over again in the chat field doesn't, that really just kind of slows down the whole process. So if we could try to avoid that, that would be appreciated. Also, in asking your question, if you want to, indicate which version of Cubase that you're running, and also which like operating system. Sometimes that information is really helpful. So that is good information for me to have access to as well. So, as we kind of get started, I'm presenting again. My name is Greg Undo. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And, I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist. And if you want to tell us who you are in the Hangout, just do a quick introduction, tell us who you are and where you're from. Also, if this is your first Hangout, that's always great information to know. So, but we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Like many people during the pandemic, my family is at home, so you may hear my wife above me working. My son is doing virtual learning from home, so he may have an interruption when he finishes his school. So I'll try to minimize those interruptions so we get through as many questions as possible. But let's go ahead and take a quick look at who's on. I'm seeing many familiar faces. It's wonderful. But let's go ahead and take a look, see who's on the Hangout here. All right, so we're going to have, all right, so we see Sir Robert from Atlanta. Good to see you, long time. All right, so we have Jay from Connecticut. All right, Pablo from Galicia, España. All right, we have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. All right, so we have Sir N68 from Sweden. Okay. All right, so we see Jazz Dude from, I believe he's in Germany. All right, so we have Stefan from Sweden. All right, so we have Berkshire, UK. So Trance 2020. All right, so we have Kingston, New York. We have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right. Okay, let's see who else. All right, so we have Captenergy Music from, I believe he's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. All right, we have Millard Brown, also from Pennsylvania. We have Demetrius from Greece. All right, so we have Uno from Finland. All right, we have Walter from St. Louis. Good to see you. All right. And Millard's indicating it's sunny Pennsylvania. I think we have sun now and it's going to start raining this afternoon. All right, so we have Austin. All right, so we have Ted from Sherman Oaks. We have Senegal, Kiev, Serbia, Kenosha, Brazil. All right, Serbia. All right. All right, so we have Jan from CubaseIndex.com. So if you want to search for any questions that we may have seen covered in the Hangouts, you can go to CubaseIndex.com. All right, we also have Joey from Egypt. All right, so Tim Weinheimer, very dedicated. Last Friday, Tim was doing our post-Hangout Zoom get together, and he actually, took his phone in a car, and we could see him kind of driving to pick up his son, I believe. So that was fun to watch. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So let me just scroll back and we'll see our first questions. Okay. All right, so question. I want to put an Ambisonics VST ambidecoder on the control room headphone and a 5.1 on control room speakers simultaneously. How can I do this since they are all set from the main mix? This is for game development where we have different stems depending on which output is selected, headphones or speakers. So I was just kind of playing around with this just a little bit right before. So let's say, I'm not sure if we could do this, and I may have to kind of play around with it over the weekend, but in my audio connections, I have a 5.1 out and let's say an Ambisonics output. So let's say if I wanted to make this my main mix for my Ambisonics. So let's say I have just like a quick, so I have this sound file playing. So I have this going out to my Ambisonics bus now. And if we wanted to just put, and I don't have this kind of hooked up to where other people could hear it. But let's say at this point, if I wanted to go, let's see if I go to Ascend, if I could also send this track simultaneously to the 5.1 out and the Ambisonics out. Okay, so right now I could have this particular track being sent to, my 5.1 out. In addition to the Ambisonics out, and since, we have the binaural audio, so this would send the audio to both destinations, and then you could monitor accordingly. So if you wanted to monitor with your headphones here, you could open up the VST ambidecoder here. So you can say, I want to monitor with my headphones. And then I think if you want, and I didn't get a chance to prepare for this, but that you could maybe switch to different monitors. So if we're in our monitor setup here, we could say, I want to go to my control room and let's remove this, and maybe if I add a 5.1 monitor setup here, that you might be able to monitor with the headphones and come over here to your different monitors to switch to your 5.1 so that you could listen to the main Ambisonics kind of in the headphones through the ambidecoder, and then now monitor directly with the 5.1 setup here. So that's something I could play around with it a little more of the weekend, but you may be able to do that, or to send it to groups, and a group could be a 5.1 group or an Ambisonics group, and then you could route those to your different monitoring sources. Okay, so we had a question. All right, can you half or double the tempo of a MIDI loop in an existing project? So there's a couple ways to do this. So let's say if I have MIDI information here. So let's say if I have my MIDI part and I wanted to half or double the tempo of this. So what you could do is, let's go ahead and I'll just select all. Okay, so, and we could do this from the logical editor. So at this point we could just say, okay, I want to take this, let's go to the logical editor. And I think that there are, if we go to standard set, one that you could say, I want it to half tempo, and this would make it twice as long. So what we could do is just come over here and this logical editor. So we see this is a series of 16th notes. And what I could do now is turn those into 8th notes. So it just basically doubled the length of those particular notes. So again, if I wanted to do this, so we say half tempo, we could just take within the existing MIDI part, we could kind of make the parts twice as long. And conversely, we could say that we want to double the tempo, and that would make the notes half as long. So when we come over here, we'll choose double tempo and now hit apply. And now we could have that phrase just be kind of laid out as being half as long. There's another method that some people will use as well. If you go to the object selection modes, you can say object applies time stretch. So let's say if I have this part and it's broken down, my snap is set to, like, let's say beat here. So I have one beat of 16th note. So if I switch this particular part here to sizing applies time stretch, I could also just come here. Okay, so I'll just say let's use quantize. So now I could just kind of take the contents of that and stretch. It's almost like a time stretching of audio, but for MIDI data. So those are some methods to half or double the tempo of the existing MIDI loop in a project. So I hope that makes sense. All right, we also have Carlos from Colombia. Well, great to see you on a Hangout again. All right, so for my high school Spanish, I believe this is, why are there tutorials where they speak French or Spanish? So, we have people doing different tutorials, but my Spanish is pretty rudimentary. And I don't speak French. I know that some of the other product specialists, I think we've done stuff in German on our YouTube channel as well. And, I think that there's some Japanese tutorials. I think that you could watch the translation in multiple languages, but I will kind of pass that on. But I understand the desire for that. But when we do this, I'm just the quintessentially ignorant American who's not so good with language. All right. Okay. Hello, everybody. Is it me, or do we all have the same question among others? Cubase and Apple Silicon, M1, etc. So it's currently being investigated. It's a pretty significant architectural change, and there's lots of different components that have to be completely rewritten in a program. And so it's, the team at Steinberg and, obviously just about every third-party company is running into this as well. So Okay, so just seeing from Jay, after some research into WAV file container capabilities using the RIF standard ever since Windows 3.1, WAV file should be able to contain audio, MIDI, and more. This would almost equate to a programmer's object file, which holds most sound data internally, addressing itself instead of separate files clumsily aiming at each other. Greg, would you please ask Steinberg software engineers why we did not fully utilize these Microsoft RIF.wave containers? So there are a lot of the functions that are utilized. So you could see the timestamps. You could have tempo information, multiple tempo points within a particular file. There's lots of different metadata. Sometimes that metadata isn't universally translated between different programs, but if there's specific metadata that you want to see, within the, a lot of metadata could be written as part of the media bay as well. So a lot of people kind of miss this, but if you wanted to, just go to your VST sound, and so as you go to different formats, so let's go to, just see if my media bay is gonna. So now that you could actually come over here and put a lot of your own metadata directly in. So, but a lot of programs, don't read that. So it's, there's all sorts of different metadata discussions on what is actually implemented. And if we spend a lot of time implementing it, there's different industry standards that are trying to be done by like the Recording Academy and the Producers and Engineering Wing that's different than the Microsoft standard. So there isn't quite a particular standard, but if there is particular metadata that you're not seeing, let me know, because sometimes even Wavelab has some pretty extensive metadata support as well. Okay. Okay, so from Taylor, why don't I see my trim sample icon when I select range in the sampler control, Cubase 11? All right, so let's say I will drag this sample down. So I just select a range here. I'll just do it with a new. I'm going to change my connections here so we could hear. Bear with me, so I'm not sending out of an ambisonic bus. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to create a sampler track here. So as soon as I kind of just select a particular range is when that shows up. So if I wanted to trim the samples, I could just do it like that. But let's say if I want to take just this, so as soon as the range is selected on my end, we could actually see the trim sample. So I get this question a lot when, if we just kind of don't have anything selected, that the trim isn't available. But once you kind of move to the middle, and it seems like from your question, Taylor, that you you select a range here, so that you should see it like that. And then if you wanted to trim that, you could just trim kind of like so. So make sure that you have the range selected here, and just in case you had like the range selected on the audio file itself. But let me know if you're doing something differently. Okay. Okay, hi Greg. Where can I find the setting that makes the keyboard arrow up, down, navigate between tracks and not the events? Okay, so let's come over here. I think it's in the preferences, and it might be under. Let me just see if it's. There's like a up down. Use up down for only tracks. Let me see if I can find it quickly. All right, just look for this. I probably went over it, but I'll just see if I could find it again. Thought it might be in here. Okay, so here under editing, so it's the very first one, use up-down navigation commands for selecting tracks only. So once we have that selected, and if I have multiple parts here, it's only going to be my up-down arrows will only be fixed to the tracks and not to the advance or MIDI notes. So sorry, it took me a while to find that. So under editing, use up-down navigation commands for selecting tracks only. Okay, question. After recording, it's annoying that the up-down doesn't change the track. I need to touch the mouse and click on track. Okay, so, all right, so it's kind of covered. You see that in Sherman Oaks, California, it's a chilly 63. So, all right, so we have Darko from Sylvania. Good to see you again. All right, so we have Ramiro from Puerto Rico. This is the first hangout. Welcome. And feel free to ask any questions that you have. All right, good to see Scott from Racine, Wisconsin. Okay, so we have a question from Sir N68. Greg, can you tell me the order of the chain in channel settings? The E in the channel, the first EQ, then inserts. You said from left to right, but it has not stuck in me so far. Okay, so if I wanted to kind of see the signal flow, you know, as we come here, we have our channel, then it's going to go through the inserts, the channel strip, and that we could think of like our channel strip in the middle part, and then the sends, and then to the output. Now, some people may want to have the channel strip show up before the EQs in the signal flow, or the channel strip to show up, before the inserts. So if we click here, we could move the channel strip to before the insert. So now the channel strip comes before the inserts. And at this point, we could have the inserts come before the channel strip. And within our channel strip, we could just drag and change the order of the processing within the channel strip. So we could kind of go from left to the center, to the right, to the output. And that's how kind of the signal flow works. But if you wanted to toggle the inserts before the channel strip, or the elements within the channel strip to, you know, be different, to change the order of those, you could do that as well. All right, good to see CJ on the Hangout. It's good to have you on the Zoom meet last week. All right, so all right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Bear with me while I scroll back. Okay, so Tim from Mission Viejo, I have a question. How to take a stem from a project and add it to the pool? Thanks, Greg, for all that you do. All right, so if we have, you know, our project here, so let's say, you know, I wanted to take a stem, and let's say if we're doing, you know, if maybe it's a stem from like a background, like maybe a drum bus or something like that. And if we wanted to add that into the pool, I will just kind of pop over here. So let's say if I want to take all of my drums and I have these routed to a bus. So, and stems could mean different things for different people. So if we're wanting to send these to a group track to the selected channels, and I'll just make this a stereo group. And I will just, let's say, set my left and right locators accordingly. I could come here and do an export audio mix down, and we'll call this a drum stem. And with this, I'm going to we could choose to insert it into the pool. We could also create an audio track of it. So I'll just say it'll just come here. I will add this to the queue, and let's go ahead and start the export. So it's going to I'll just cancel this because I had set for real time. So now I'll just create that. So this will add it into the audio project. it will add it into an audio file in the project, and will automatically, so we'll come here, we can copy that to our project folder automatically. Here's our drum group. And now when we go to our pool window, so we go to media to pool window, we'll see our drum stem just placed right there. If you wanted to like just combine multiple parts, let's say if I had these two guitar parts, we could choose to, I will select these parts here. I could select just the tracks themselves or the individual parts. And if we go to edit, we could do a render in place. And I'll go to my render settings. And at this point, we could choose to mix down to one audio file. So if I have like, multiple files, I just wanted to consolidate. And we could choose to disable the source tracks or replace the source tracks. So if I wanted to come here, I'll just say, let's render. And now that we're going to render in place, I could take the two mono guitar parts and have it rendered. And at this point, it'll just be kind of rendered as one stereo audio file that we could then... and that would automatically show up, and we could do our naming conventions. But now if we go to the pool window, we could just, we'll see our untitled, and that's going to be our rendered audio file, our rendered in place file, or our exported audio. So again, within the export audio, if you wanted to show up in the pool but not in the project, you could just choose on after export what you wanted to do. So if you choose create audio track, that will automatically insert it into the pool as well. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Tim. All right, so we have Scambot Terminator from Milwaukee. So we have our Wisconsin contingent on. Okay. So question, is there a macro way to automate the replacement of every gap of silence greater than 1 second with only 1 second of silence? I don't know of one. Let me just think about this for a second. So if we have like a number of tracks here, where maybe we don't have, like if we want to determine if this is silent. So let's say if I play this, like on our snare track here, the snare doesn't come in for a while. So say if we go to kind of our sample editor, and we could choose to go to audio advanced, excuse me. So let's just say, okay, I'm just going to select the file here. So now that we have that selected, just not in the sample window. All right, so you want it to, so you want to automate the replacement of every gap of silence greater than 1 second with only 1 second of silence. Okay, so, and if I'm reading this right, let me just take a different approach to this. is, let's say if we have okay, so I think this might be what you're wanting to do is maybe just to have, sorry for if I misread this, but let's say if we have our events, and I think that maybe you want them only to have 1 second between them, regardless of how much. So let's say if I think what you want to do is to, if there's more than 1 second, to move this event 1 second away. So let's see if we could do that. So I think if we go, all right, so I think what we want to do is basically move our cursor to the end of this event. I'll try not to spend I may have to kind of work on this a little bit offline, but we'll give it a shot. So let's just do a new macro. Okay. Okay, so in some of these you may have to be kind of contingent. So let's say if I wanted to okay, so I want to go to next. Okay, and let's say nudge 1 frame. And then let's choose to select the event under cursor. I think will be under preferences. Okay, so let's do this. All right. So I think what we could do is, and I may just do this offline for expediency, but we take this and let's go ahead and just kind of select this. But there is kind of a function. And let's see if I... All right, so and then what I want to do is basically to move this event, and I may have to switch the grid to events. And let's say if that now snaps and hit B, hit back twice, and then let's say, and at this point you could go to and there is a function where you could add a set spacer between events. So if you come here to so I think I could spend some more time on it, Ted, if you want to email me. But I think I might be able to get that in a macro, but I don't want to spend 20 minutes of the hangout on it. But I think you could, and let me know if that's what you want to accomplish. But I think I could get the macro kind of dialed in for you to accomplish that, if that's what if you want to replace the gap between those events like that. So. All right, so just see a comment from Millard Brown. Hey, Greg, thanks for the help last week. I made sure to select stereo in before exporting, and all the channels made it to the respective files intact. That's great. Thanks for letting us know, Millard. Good to see you on the Zoom get-together as well. All right, we see it's very cold in Sweden, according to Jan at cubaseindex.com. Okay. All right, so we see Agent K is on. He's always helpful in doing moderation when we need it. We appreciate that. Okay, so we see what is the easiest way to insert two new empty measures between two parts of a song. All right, so I'll just go back to my multi-track project here quickly, just to kind of show this. And we can kind of do this with the range tool. So let's say if I'm here and I want to, I think if you hold down Alt plus Shift whilst using the range tool, not that, let me just get my modifier keys here. Hang on. Constantly switching between Mac and PC on the same keyboard, so all right, so what we want to do is, let's say if I just want to insert just figure out how to do my global range. Okay, so if you want, you could just kind of select the range that you want. And what you want to do is come over here to edit. And when you go to range, we could just come right here and insert silence. And what that will do is just knock everything over by the range amount that you had selected. And So, and there is kind of a global way of selecting the range. Let me just see if I get the, it's like, I thought it was Alt Shift, but maybe not. But okay, so if you hold down Command or Control plus Shift, so we can now select the range and then go to Edit, and you get a range, and you could just choose to insert silence, and everything else kind of gets bumped over. And if you do that globally, that will include all of your tempo track information, markers. Those will all be kind of included in that. So again, just Control Shift or Command Shift, and that will allow you to select globally. Go to your edit to range, insert silence, and everything kind of gets bumped over. Hang on just 1 second. My son's knocking at the door. All right, sorry about that. My son's on his last screen break before his weekend, so he's excited. All right, so a question: how can I have different tracks follow different time signatures at the same time? Okay, so what some people will do is just kind of write in. So let's say I'll just start with a new empty project, and let's just add all right, so say we'll do something in 3/4. So I'll just do a quick step entry here. And let's make it just quarter notes. Okay, so that's kind of in 3/4 times. So if we listen to it now, we could. All right. And what I could do now is let's just go ahead and lock the events here. So we could just say, and at this point, I could say, let's go to, let's add another instrument track. Okay. All right, so I want to now put this into 4/4. So that's still going to play back in our 3/4, you know. So even though this is in patterns of 3, so let's say I want to do something in patterns of 4 here. So now we'll have kind of our base in 3/4, the other pattern. And let's say if I wanted to add like a drum part, to define even more. So just load up a random kit here. All right. Pulling some Simon Phillips action. So if I wanted to, come here and just do this in 4/4, I'll do the worst drum programming ever. So let me just select this track. I'll extract the drum map. All right, but let's say now we'll just do hi-hats in 8th note triplets. All right, so this way you could have kind of different polymeters if you want. So I could just, sorry, my mouse is acting a little weird. All right. So we'll see how this sounds. So you could have kind of different meters and just kind of lock different values, but realize that everything is going to eventually kind of go around the clock, and and a 3, you have 4 measures of 3/4 or 3 measures of 4/4, so equals 12 beats. So you could do stuff like that as well. So if you want to do kind of poly time signature, polymeter type stuff, you could do that pretty easily. So okay, so we see I'm from Senegal using Cubase since version 1 with floppy disk and Atari computer. Always have that Cubase in his key. That's great. I start with version 2, so you've been running Cubase longer than me. Okay. So question, is there any way or plug-in to turn a mono input guitar input into stereo without duplicating and panning? Ozone Imager. So, if you have a mono source, technically it's just going to take and do, it's not going to turn it into stereo. But, if you have it set up where, so let's come over here to this project. And I'll just revert. Okay, so let's say I'll just mute one of the guitars. So I have one of the guitars, I have two guitars here panned. But, you know, as soon as it's, if you want it to be in both speakers, I will just kind of come. So let's pan this guitar. So now, even though it's a mono guitar, that's all coming through. And some people will use like different effects. So if you wanted to, let's say, send this to a group. So I'm gonna make it a stereo group. And on this group, I could just put on like an imager. And if you want to add width here. And then you also can have kind of different panning options as well. So if you come here to the stereo group, I could switch to panner. And often just, you know, putting different effects on it. So if I wanted to put a quick So, you know, those are some of the things, but, you know, think of it if you have your, you could do some processing, but if you have a mono source, it's going to be mono. You know, it's easy enough to duplicate tracks and stuff like that. You know, it's just really one mouse click and you could duplicate tracks and pan it, but you could do it through different effects processing. So you don't need to go out and buy like a third-party imager. Cubase has one, or just kind of running it. You know, use the built-in imager. Okay, so let me just scroll through. All right, so we see a comment from Fat Jack. Hi all, great stuff, very hangout. All right. And Millard Brown wants everyone to hit the like button. So Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. Okay. We see some discussion on the Townsend mic lab. So I guess John Costigan's ordering one and Ted Springman's looking to get one. So he could spend his American stimulus money. All right. So a question, if I'm working on a video and I need to change tempo between two scenes, is there a way to do this instantaneous or gradual change of tempo into another scene? So if we have a video here, sorry, my mouse is acting weird today. I'll just go to another project. See if it's in my recents list here. Okay. Okay, and if you want it kind of like a, you know, transition between two scenes tempo wise, So let's come here, let's add a tempo track. And one thing that's often kind of missed in the tempo track. Okay, so we have kind of a tempo track here. Is a lot of times people, there's this little button here where you could have kind of step changes. So as we put in like a tempo, it's going to just immediately go there. But you could also choose to kind of ramp the tempo. So if you're like, okay, I need to be directly here at this point, you could just choose to say, okay, right at this tempo point, and you could kind of find, the scene. So as you kind of move here, you can say, okay, right at this point, and I wanted to gradually slow down to a different tempo. Let's say to right there. So I'm going to, let's just erase a couple of the tempo points here. And I want it at this point to be at this particular tempo. And now you could just kind of choose your different points and say, I wanted to gradually transition, but you could kind of just set exactly where you want that tempo change to be. But make sure that if you want it to be gradual, and you may have to just kind of like move this over to the right, then you could see this ramp icon as opposed to step. So, and when you have automatic, that will kind of use the current mode and kind of stay in that particular mode. So if you always want to do step or always ramp, it'll just kind of repeat the last setting that you had. Okay, so a question, if possible, I'd like some info on using control room with a multi-output sound card. What do people use the extra outputs for? So my audio interface, I have 16 outputs per interface, and how I have my control room set up is I have one set of speakers in my control room. I have monitors. So in my room, I have a stereo. I have stereo monitors and a 5.1 monitor system. So I use 8 of the outputs. I use 2 for my main stereo, and then I have a secondary monitor set up, and that's my 5.1. I have kind of a variation of my 5.1, so my 5.1, they're smaller speakers physically, and they sound a little bit different. So I take the outputs of my, I use an alternate, like left-right, an alternate stereo for the left and right of my 5.1, and I use my center channel as a mono. So that way I have kind of 4 different monitoring configurations. So that requires 8 outputs. So I would just kind of set this up for like my Yamaha HS7s, and I have some older NHTs. So, and I would say, this is going to be outputs 1 and 2. And my NHTs would be 3 through 8. And then 3 and 4 of my NHTs is the front, and 7 of my audio interface goes out to the center channel. So at that point, we could have 8 outputs there. Now, when we're doing different headphone mixes, so let's say if we're tracking a band and all of a sudden it's like, okay, the guitar player wants to hear more of themselves in their headphone, as does the drummer, the vocalist, and the bassist. We could send these to 8 outputs here. These outputs could be fed into headphone amps, and this way we could do kind of independent, more me, quote unquote, mixes for the individual musicians. But we need kind of discrete outputs into headphone amps to do that. So once you have those headphone amps kind of configured, at that point, that's where I use another 4 outputs. And also, I have other connections to expand, and I still have like external effects in my studio. So this way I could send signal out to my lexicon reverb and bring it back into additional inputs. So that's how you could use more of your outputs and inputs. So, outputs for headphone mixes, outputs for speakers, if you have more than one pair of speakers, like maybe you started with some speakers and then you got better ones, but you still have your other ones, your original ones hooked up, you could just switch back and forth using the control room and say, okay, I'm listening to, my large stereo speakers, my 5.1. I'm listening to my left and right of my 5.1 and and just a center channel, and you could switch between these different speaker configurations right there. So that's how you could use the control room with a multi-out device. Good to see Gareth on the Hangout. All right. Okay, so we have a question. How can I find what key is a sample melody loop and time manipulate it, but keep the pitch? Okay, so if it's, depending on if it's a melody loop, if it's monophonic, so let's say if I wanted to, come over here, I'll do a new project. Okay, and I'll just get to my loops, and let's say we'll have like a quick vocal loop here.
Day after day after.
Okay, so let's say it's like a melody loop, and I want to what key it's in. So it's not necessarily going to tell you a key, but you could go directly into the VariAudio editor, and at this point, it could tell you what notes. So at this point, you say, okay, we're starting off with, as we
day
listen.
After day after.
And if I wanted to change, like, the E flat, I could just come
day after.
Or let's say, okay, let's make it go up.
Day after.
So, and once this file is in kind of musical mode and we know what the tempo is, at this point, I could slow down the tempo. And since it's in musical mode, which could be activated here on the timeline, we could just...
Day after.
It's going to just slow down. So let's say, okay, I want it to be 88 beats a minute. So it kind of stays at the same bar position.
Day after.
So, or if I do to 360 beats a minute, so let's say 88. And now it's going to just play back.
Day after.
So you could just kind of change the tempo accordingly. And if it's in musical mode, it'll just kind of be like a tempo parasite, and it'll just stick and follow that tempo.
Day after.
Whatever you do with that. So, but it, you could see kind of what the notes are, and you could kind of, figure out probably what the key is. You say, okay, in this, they're hitting this note, so they're hitting an F sharp. So that's kind of where this melody is. So, so it could be maybe F sharp minor, or maybe it's a third in D major, so it's not going to necessarily, say you're in, this particular mode, or, or if it's minor or major. So, all right. So see comment from Gareth, just thanking me for my expert bass line. So I contributed a bass line for Gareth's song. That was a lot of fun. I was typing in all the chord changes. I was like, how is this all going to work? And then, but it was clever chord progression. So I liked playing on that song. Thanks, Gareth, for inviting me to play bass on it. All right, so we have Ali from Iran. Good to see you on Hangout again. Okay. All right, good to see JVI again on a Hangout. All right. So is there a quick learn function so that you could assign your mod wheel to cutoff of the sampler track? So when you want to do learn functions, you could do this. Let's say if I wanted to make a sampler
A
track.
new day.
So let's say I create a sampler track here. So a lot of so let's say if we wanted to, so you could assign it to quick controls. So let's say, and we could set up our quick controls. If you have, and this is a great thing to have, is just having one particular set of it's common to have maybe like an 8 bank of rotary encoders, different knobs. So if I'm here, I could go to my track quick controls, and I'm just going to learn and just move a slider here. So I could just say, okay, let's learn this. I'm just going to move to fader on my MIDI controller. So, okay, so what I could do now is just come here, and I could just take the cutoff, and if I could say, let's assign this to so let's say I will now just come over here to the quick controls, and you could actually just kind of click on any of these. So if I just wanted to adjust the level or the filter resonance, but you could choose, these particular parameters too. So if you just say, okay, let's go to cutoff, and now you could just have that controlled by whatever controller that you have configured here, and that could be your mod wheel if you wanted it to be. So just go to your studio setup and set up the quick controls one time for probably most MIDI controllers, or if you have a CC121, you could use those for quick control modes. And then once you get that set up, you could save it as presets, and that way you can have kind of your 8 go-to parameters and be able to kind of assign that functionality to have kind of tactile control. All right, let me just my chat field jumped on me. So let me just navigate back to where I was. Sorry about that. Okay. So it's just the question from Jazz Dude, just installed all new updates, C11, Retrolog, and Groove Agent SE. At Cubase, is there any new content added in Retrolog or Groove Agent? I think most of it was just some internal stuff for high DPI. There's a few tweaks for that, and also for more on the Mac OS side as well, but no new patches or content that I'm aware of. So we see question, why does VST Plugin Manager show one instance of Mix Convert version 6 on a brand new empty project? I think that the Mix Convert might be just being accessed from the control room. So if you have the control room turned on, I believe that it's kind of loaded in the control room functionality. So once you go to the down mix panels, so I believe that this is basically just kind of using the mix convert algorithm. So that's why you may see it. So if you have the control room activated there, that's, I think, using the mix convert, and why you may see it, that it's being used in the project. So we have a question: is the intended purpose of formant control to compensate for Chipmunk and Darth Vader pitch shifting effects? Yeah, so what happens a lot of times with the formants is, as you do pitch shifting, the formants can sound a little unnatural. So if not all the formants aren't kind of taken into effect. But you could also do some other interesting things with pitch, with like the formant control on pitch shift. But that's really kind of the intention, is to kind of mitigate, artifacts that could be introduced when you kind of do pitch correction of audio. But people will do some other creative uses of it as well. So I'll just show you one here, because we could do it with the pitch correct plugin. Has a great function to kind of show this. So I'll just put it on my inserts for this particular track. And this is a plugin that a lot of people don't utilize. But if you wanted to come over here to the pitch correct plugin, let's say I wanted the singer to sound younger or older. So I'll just make this a little louder. So we have this formant shift here. And let's say I wanted her to sound older. So say back to our original formant. And let's make her sound younger. You can almost do a duet. What's mine and what's yours? Now you're asking Beatles or Stones. And let's make her sound younger again. Something bad that just sounds so wrong. What is too late to start a fight? Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Just leave it alone. So I know a lot of people will use that on like background vocals to make it sound like it's not them, just kind of give it a little variety, so it sounds like multiple people are singing, where they'll just kind of copy it and kind of adjust the formants to kind of, come up with like a natural chorusing effect with, just kind of even the same track. So that's, but the original intention of the formant preservation. And if you wanted to also kind of do it inside of Very Audio, this was added in version 10. So if we're in and we go to the smart controls and show all of the smart controls, if you find that you did like a no correction and maybe the formants are working a bit against you, you could go to the lower left-hand corner and you could adjust the formants on an individual segment, just like that as well. And you could also in Very Audio adjust the volume there. So, but those are some kind of creative tool aspects of using, formant settings. So. Okay, so you see question why the denoiser disappeared. So with Cubase, we never included a denoiser plugin. There's one that's included with Wavelab. There was a, so it's, so I'm not sure if it so there's never one that came with Cubase. So if you had a denoiser plugin, in the early days, like 1997 ish, 96, 97, there was a denoiser declicker plugins that were sold separately. And it was also kind of bundled as a restoration pack. But those aren't working on contemporary operating systems, I think. But in Wavelab there is a restoration suite plugin as well, but Cubase has never come with a denoiser. So okay, so we see from Michael Teams how to find the tempo of a group of stems importing into a project, no BPM noted. So a lot of times if you need to figure out what the tempo is, so let's say, you could do there's a couple different approaches, but if you just do a quick tempo detect on a file, so let's say if I just select a particular file here and I go to project to tempo detection, and so there's no tempo information at all. And let's say like this is a good example where we have varying tempo information. We could now come over here, go to advanced, and we could say set definition from tempo track. And now when we do this, we could actually put that and embed it into the audio file or within the project. So I'll just say, let's embed it in the audio file itself. So this will have kind of extended metadata with the tempo changes at the different beats. So if I wanted to go to my pool window here, we can now, you'll see kind of, varying tempos. You'll see kind of the tempo indicated right there. So that's how you could do it, Michael. And he's saying he just updated from a kerosene powered computer. So that's good. It'll inspire you for the song to play your guitar parts really well, which you did on those tracks. Okay. Okay. Hello, Greg. When I go to extension and want to use spectral layers, I see only preparing data and nothing happened. Any advice? Okay. So yeah, I haven't, I would check. So if I'm not sure if it's the spectral layers 1 that comes with it, but so when I come here, if you see the spectral layers, that means that it's installed. So let's go over here and just say, okay, now I wanted to open this file up in spectral layers. So, but I haven't seen that particular message. I would, make sure, check to see if it's the spectral layers 1 that comes with Cubase. Sometimes updating the e-licenser may help with some stuff like that. And there is, I think, a 7.02 for Spectral Layers Pro elements, as well as the Spectral Layers 1. So you may want to just kind of check that as well and see if you have the latest version, but also check to see if your actual e-licenser is updated, because some of the spectral layers could utilize some of the later licensed databases. So okay, so we see from Millard Brown, too many plugins. Is there a way, such as block list, to reduce the plugins that Cubase scans upon opening, other than uninstalling? I'm not quite ready to commit to uninstall many of these. I would try to, I think it's still going to, like when you're starting up, it may, um, if it's a VST3 plugin, it may kind of automatically just kind of look for that particular folder without uninstalling. I know, what I've seen a lot of people do is go into, like, if you're on PC, like a trick that I would do when I didn't want particular plugins to load, I would just call them, instead of like, whatever plugin.dll, I would just change it to whatever plugin.dl underscore. And then it wouldn't see that as a plugin, but you didn't uninstall. You just kind of change the actual name. If it's VST2 plugins, you could also just come here and have Cubase. You'll see like the little settings cogwheel. And if you click here, you could see that you could just have Cubase not look in particular VST2 plugin paths. So those are a couple options to try, Millard. So we see a question from Rick. Every time I export a video, it always ends up being 2 or 3 gigabytes. Is there any way to change the size of the video file or to match the size it was at import? So it's currently set to a fixed size. So I think, I've heard some discussions that maybe there'll be kind of variable discussions, but you may want to, just export different sections, or maybe, take those sections into, if that's too big. So, you could take the 2 or 3 gigabyte video that's generated and maybe re-encode it in a video tool, maybe like something like DaVinci Resolve or something like that. So, but it's kind of fixed at this point, but it works well. Okay, so question for Cubase 11 Pro and Win 10 regarding the parabola tool in the key editor, not reading out the start value, so you never know what the value you start. This was different in 10.5, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, so let's just come here to the parabola tool. All right, so let me just turn off my step entry. All right, so I can see the position indicated. All right, I'll just try loading 10.5 quickly. I'll see if that's different. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so see it kind of indicated here on the left-hand side. Let me just jump back. Yep. So I think I see what you're saying, that you don't see it indicated here. I'll send that as a note to our team. Sorry about that. So I see from Scott, do you know, or could you suggest to Steinberg, I would like to have more than 3 zones available in the mixed console, 5 to 8 would be wonderful. You know, one of the things that people do when you need more zones is you actually have 3 different mixed consoles. So I'll see some people that will just have only inputs on this mixed console. So you could, come over here. This is like when I'm tracking, I only want to see inputs. I go to Mix Console 2. And for this, I only want to see audio. I don't want to see MIDI, groups, or effects. So, and then I could choose to see audio and instruments. And in Mix Console 3, I could come over here and have, my groups and outputs configured. So here I'll just say, okay, my outputs and my groups and effects channels. So I think, for people that need more zones, is they just kind of utilize the 3 separate mix consoles. So see if that makes sense. If you want to get that configured, and you could set them up and save them in workspaces so that they all kind of load up in a predictable manner. So, but give that a shot and see if that makes sense for you. All right, and I'll just switch my configuration here. Okay, so I see question. Don't you think that we should be able to use range selection tool on edit mode, Greg? There are some times I would write a hi-hat and just want to duplicate to the grid without copying and pasting. So I've kind of lobbied for I believe that this is in edit mode with the MIDI. So let's say if I have a workaround that you could do if you're not aware of this. But yeah, I've been lobbying for this, and I will continue to do so. Is, let's say I have MIDI data. All right, but it's not starting at the beginning or the end of the project. So if I come here and let's say if I duplicate these events here, and what happens is they just kind of get, just by D, it'll just go to the very end of the event. And with this, I wanted the duplication to be, let's say, right. I'll just delete a couple of these notes. I want it to be this range of time. So if you go here, you could go to the track control settings, but if you hit, I think it's Command-Shift-I, that will take you to the in-place editor. And I know this is a workaround. But so now that we're on the project window, we could just use the range selection tool. And as we work with the range selection tool, I can say, let's select, 2 measures of data here. And now when I duplicate, it'll still kind of keep the space before and after because I could select that range. So, and if you always want that function there, you could go to your track control settings. So just right click, go to your track control settings, and you'll probably see hidden objects of the edit in place. Simply move that over to visible. And when you need to do that type of edit, you could use the in place editor. So. Okay. So you see a question. Hi, Greg, can you give us an idea of what all the loop packs can be used for? Seems like composing with them just inserts familiar phrases written by somebody else, sound design maybe. Thanks. A lot of times you may just, when you're starting a project, like sometimes, when you start a project and you just hear like the metronome, it may not be the most inspiring thing to play along with. But if we come over here and say, I want, different phrases. So I could just come over here to different loops. So I could say, maybe I want more of, an older soul type drum loop. So maybe like a 70s R&B. So I could just say, okay, let's come over here. There's many like pop producers who will just go through like thousands of loops. So let's say if I want that loop, and now I could play to this particular loop, and not have any concerns about it. So we could just kind of drag and drop. And you'll get some loops that are like really kind of well designed for, working for, different genres. Like maybe, you don't, like a great example, if you want like different synth loops, and you're going for, let's say you have to do a cue for Stranger Things on Netflix, where they have a bunch of 80s music. You could come over here to Night Call, and this is all just... and I could come here and, okay, if I want my tempo to be, 80 beats a minute, and now I could just, again, just... And there's also like, my friend Robert Dudzik, he just came out with, like these, which are like amazing for composers where you have these cinematic... So instead of like, if you're on a tight deadline and you have, you don't have 4 weeks to come up with sounds that kind of make these sound design elements, you could come here. And these are also like really good for impacts. So if you wanted to... and being able to take this into a sampler track and let's say, okay, now I just wanted to reverse the samples here to see what it's like. Or let's play down 2 octaves, And let's say we put it into monophonic mode, and I come here and just kind of change the pitch. So, it just gives you like, really good, interesting content as like a little source of inspiration often. So, and it's all kind of royalty free. So you could use it in your productions without any worries of, having to give up a copyright if you got a hit later on. There's lots of stories about that in our industry. Okay, in Cubase 10.5, after I normalize, just a question, after I normalize an audio part, the normalize control disappears. Can you explain some of the new features here? So let's say if I wanted to take this particular file, I'll just do a quick bounce selection. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to normalize this file, so I believe it's the same in 10 and 11. So let's come over here to our processes and we'll choose our normalize. So we'll say normalize here. Okay. Okay, so I see kind of like my peak. I could do it by peak or by loudness normalization. So if I want to do like, set it to LUFS, so, we could just kind of, so with 10, let me just see. So, once it's been done, so as we come here, I can say, okay, let's normalize it to, -1. And you can see the audio, or let's say I want this to be, -45. So, you could audition kind of, the different functions here. So, but that's kind of, so it's just automatically going to, take that particular file and normalize accordingly. So let's say I'll take this and normalize. And let's say if I wanted to go to a specific like loudness units level, again, just come right over here and, just kind of normalize the particular functions. Not sure why this could be maybe a write protected file. All right. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. Okay, we have a question. Is it possible to do multiple fade ins and outs simultaneously regarding each note on a channel? Can you shape their sound simultaneously? It is time consuming. Individually, is it possible? So let's say if it's going to be for like audio, so let me just jump back to our project here. Okay, so, if I have, stuff set up for, let's say, if I want to take all of my audio sources here and I'll just hide my mix console temporarily, we could choose to, whatever is selected, we could do kind of our, fade in or fade out on all of the files simultaneously. So you could do that. Now, if it's going to be MIDI, it could really depend on if you're using, if you're going to be doing velocities or if you're working with, not just velocities, but MIDI CC7. So, you could take hang on just 1 second. I'll tell my son just to hang on. All right. So, but if we're dealing with MIDI for, and if I wanted to write MIDI volume 7 on all of the files. So let's just open up kind of an orchestral project here. So let's say this is kind of more orchestral and it's all MIDI data here. So now you could just link all of the channels in the mixer and bring them down. You could also just say, like, I want to turn my modulation wheel into MIDI CC7. So I could come over here to, let's say, my input transformer, and I could set this to global. So I want to take, transform, let's say, type is equal to controller, and then I wanted to take my value 1 and I'm going to send it modulation. So I want it to record MIDI CC7. So I'm going from CC1 to CC7. So I wanted to add 6 values. So now I could select all my MIDI tracks. And as I play, if I wanted to record MIDI CC7, so you could just record that MIDI CC7 on top of all the data. If you, so that will write the volume into all of the tracks. If you wanted to select all of the tracks here, depending on, so let's say I select all my parts and I go into my key editor and let's look at velocity only. I could take the velocity of every note here and scale it up. So at this point, as we play, you'll have your velocity settings. But it could really depend upon how the instrument responds to dynamics. A lot of orchestral instruments may only respond with expression or modulation data and not velocity. So it could really, so those are a couple of different ways lead to get, your volume. So you don't have to do it on individual notes. You could do it in the mix console. So if you have a number of different channels that, all have their volume here, you could do it as automation. So, if you're working with, external instruments, you'd have to kind of do it with MIDI, but virtual instruments or MIDI tracks. So I could say, I want to take these particular tracks and let's go ahead and, do a quick link. And I could just say, okay, we're going to keep the relative volume and just automate those volume changes for all the different notes. So, but, I think one of those methods, depending on if you need to do it, what the instruments that you need, how they need to respond to the dynamics, one of those methods should do the trick for you. All right, good to see Nick on Hangout. All right, good to see Neurotic Nexus made to Hangout. He's cleaning his studio. It's always a good thing to do. Okay, question. Do you know how to sidechain with MIDI trigger in Cubase? I learned it myself, but just wanted to know how you would do it. Mostly I do it with Shaperbox or Volume Shaper. So, there could be some different things for the MIDI trigger. So let's go ahead and okay, I'll just let me see if I have a project open. I think this might work. Okay, so there's different ways of kind of doing some MIDI triggering. So let's say if I was maybe doing more dance-ish piece. So let's say if I'm doing this. All right, so I think that I haven't used this plugin in forever, but there is a plugin, I think, it's called MIDI Gate. So I think that if you just kind of send, as soon as it sees a MIDI note message, so I will send this particular track here. Let me just add a MIDI track. All right, and its output, we'll do our MIDI gate. So if you wanted to, so now as soon as I hit a MIDI note and I release a MIDI note, so that's like, so some people will set up tracks just to kind of do that. So you could take stuff on and off, but if you, but let's say, just in case the questions about something else, let's say if I wanted to, come here. So the MIDI gate plugin, you could just kind of send MIDI notes to it and that will turn on and off a gate on a particular track. But let's say, so side chaining with MIDI trigger. Okay, so let me just, I'm just going to take this particular part and so I will take that and let's see if I, all right, so let me just, I'll select this and let me just do a bounce selection quickly. Okay, and now what I could do is I'm just going to double click here and let's go to our hit points and I'm going to turn into MIDI notes. Let's put it on C1. Okay, so let's say this is, I'll just add an instrument track of Groove Agent here. Okay. right, and let me just check my instrument over here quickly. Okay. Okay, so let's say if I play this now. Okay, so let's say I have this instrument. I have like maybe a synth. So this is like a MIDI note that's being sent out to a. So this MIDI part is, I'll just activate this. And let's say we have this synth, and I'll just make sure I don't kill you volume wise. So if I wanted to take that MIDI and do sidechain, I could come directly to this channel. So I want to compress. So I could activate the sidechain here. And then I could just choose my sidechain input source. Now let's choose Groove Agent SE. So that's how you could kind of just set up your sidechain kind of directly from there. Or if you wanted to do other sources as well, you could just and you could have that sent out to multiple destinations. And let's go ahead and just, so once you kind of click here, you could activate the side chain and choose your different source. So let's say if I wanted to remove just that. So as you wanted to just kind of the track that you want the side chain kind of turned on. So you could activate it here. So once we have that sidechain input turned on, you could just add that, and that's how you can do sidechaining from MIDI as well. So, all right, thanks for all the great questions. So just see from Neurotic Nexus, why is the outfind of user not working for me? So not sure if I understand. Okay, so we see a question. Thanks for the content you're doing. Is there a way to disable mouse scroll wheel and navigating over faders, sends, etc. in the mixer section? So currently there isn't. It could be a tricky thing because you may be in the mixer and okay, I want to, navigate, and there's a lot of people that will just simply come here and use their mouse scroll wheel as their control surface. So they'll just come here and hover the mouse and they'll ride, vocals and do automation and really like that. And for other parameters, so if you're in your send levels, you could just, kind of come here and be able to adjust the parameters. So, I've sent a request before, from users like maybe a bypass mouse scroll wheel other than for navigation. But I think if you just I know there's a lot of people that come here and just, they want to navigate and it's like, oh, I just moved a fader accidentally and I just wanted to navigate within the mix console. If you do happen to move the fader accidentally, let's say, you could always just hit Alt Option plus Z and that will allow you to do your undo mix console, but there's no filter of mouse scroll wheel. But it's been asked and I'll kind of reiterate the request again. Okay, so most people are saying that to create a wider tracking vocal, it's easier to convert the track to a stereo. Is that correct? Sounds right to me. So a lot of times, I'm not sure if you get a lot really just kind of converting the track to stereo. I know lots of people may, convert a track to stereo and then kind of pan it so that they could put stereo effects. But I think if you just use like a stereo, you know, like a stereo effect send on a mono vocal, that can make it obviously sound wider. My friends that do lots of very complex vocal stacking, they will take, multiple recordings and they do slight panning, and we'll stack up, like 12, 24 tracks of background vocals to kind of get that very process sound. And that's often just doing lots and lots of copies, or lots of takes and layering them together and doing subtle pans. So, but it could really depend upon the track as well. So you see, hi Greg, in the MIDI editor window, is it possible to change the modifier tool for the selection tool to be remove notes when hovering over a MIDI note and not split notes, which it defaults to? So within, version 11, one of the things that, people had requested, let's say if I'm here and I have some MIDI notes, okay, so you have this little icon now that's, in 11, this little E. So it used to be that by default, when we would double click on a note, we could go into the note expression editor. So now if this is not activated, we could just double click on the note and that will get rid of it. If you hold down the Alter Option key, you could now split a note, or you could change the size. You could, so you have different options, but, I think, the modifier key, if you wanted to just be able to delete the note, I think that, intentionally double clicking on a particular note is a good way of doing that. When you change that preference right there, then that will just delete the notes as you kind of work with it. So if you wanted to come here, you could just, whatever note that you double click on will be deleted for you. Okay. So see if that works for you, Anders. All right, so we have a question. Can you explain the add track group inside or outside folder? What is inside outside folder with that? I've kind of tried to get this terminology kind of changed a little bit. Once you understand it, I think it'll make sense. But let's explain this. All right, so you may hear my son playing piano in the background here. He's picking out his favorite cartoon melodies and learning them on piano. All right, so let's say if I want to come here, we had a lot of people that, by default, you'll have like groups, effects channels can get placed into a separate folder here. So if I select these tracks and I say, let's add a group track to the selected channels, and I say inside folder, what this is going to do is it's going to place this particular group channel that we've created and place it directly within the group channel. It's going to make a group channel folder if there isn't one and place it there. So we see our group channel folder. So if I do that again, I could come over here and say, okay, we're going to add group channels to the selected. And once we have our group track set here, if I say create inside folder, it goes into the folder on the project window, and there's our newly created tracks. If I choose outside folder, and we could think of outside folder as below the last selected track. So I'm not sure why it's not called that, but that's kind of what it's doing. So when we add a group channel to these particular tracks, sorry, let me just close the lanes. So I'm going to add a group channel to these tracks, and I'm going to say, and this works the same way for effects channels, when I say outside of the folder, so outside of the folder means that it doesn't go into the group track folder, but it's going to be placed directly below the last selected channel. So now I hit add track, and the group gets added directly here in the mix console as well as on the project window. So outside of folder is below the last selected track, and inside folder places it probably at the bottom of the project window in a group tracks folder, or in probably to the right, all the way over to the right on the mix console. Okay, so we have a question. Are there any FM synths with Cubase elements? So there isn't an FM synthesizer. There's a lot of FM synth sounds that come with Halion Sonic SE. So these are, utilizing a lot of the content, in Halion Sonic SE for some of what many will refer to kind of as rompler sounds, samples that are taken. So if you're looking for very FM synths, you could come over here and let's just say, so you could see, if you just even type in FM, you'll get kind of a lot of your classic FM tones. So you'll have kind of like a lot of classic FM sounds that you could find kind of spread throughout Halion Sonic SE. So, but it's not actual FM synthesis, but a lot of samples. And so if you're looking for those types of sounds, there's a lot of them in Halion Sonic SE. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, so we have Ian checking in from London. So we see polyrhythmic plagiarism. All right. Okay. All right, so we have someone checking in from Sri Lanka. Welcome to the Hangout. Okay, so we have from Sir N68, Cubase elements, six pre-fader inserts on each track. I've heard if you need more, just create a group track for that track, and you have the inserts in that group track. Also, another 6. Is that correct? So yeah. So let's say if I take these 2 guitars, or if I take this guitar track and I have all of my inserts loaded up, I could add a group track. And for organization purposes, I could add the group track and we'll put it outside of the folder. So that guitar is now being routed to this group where I have more inserts. I could route this group to another group, add up another 6 inserts, etc. So, and it's all delay compensated for. So you don't have to worry about any timing issues like you would with some other stuff. Okay, good to see Brianna from Youngstown. She's setting up IEC Pro, checking it out. That's great. Okay, so we have a question: in what order comes the inserts? If you have if you have group track inserts, then track inserts from my previous question. So if I have inserts here on my guitar, so let's say, okay, I just have a couple of inserts here, and then I insert, I send this to a group. So it's going to be this order of inserts. So the main inserts that we see here, and then the signal flow gets sent out to the group, and then the group, that signal flow will come after the channel inserts. And if you add another group to that group, that's how the order of the processing goes. So okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great comments and questions. And if you have if you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. Okay, hi Greg. I'm searching a way to make a rendering from the send effects only. So let's go ahead and we can show you how to do some routing for that. Okay, so let's take a couple vocals here, and let's say,
All is love. Are we there yet? Oh,
okay, so there's a couple ways that you could do this. I think, let's say if we add a send effect, or let's go ahead and add a group track to this. So I'll add a stereo group track to that particular channel. Let's say I probably don't even want that to be routed to the group. So I'm just going to route this to my stereo out. Okay, so let's say we have
all is love.
our vocal here.
Are we there yet? Oh,
Okay, so let's say I wanted to put on this group channel a reverse reverb. So I will come over here to do reverence, and let's adjust kind of our tail time here. Let's say okay, so I'm just going to do a quick plate. Okay, so let's say now I want to reverse this. So I have,
all is love.
okay, so I want to take this vocal, and in the sends, I'm going to send it to the group. And the group will have the reverb on it, the reverse reverb.
All is love.
So I'll turn this on, activate the
Are we
send.
there yet? Are we there yet? Oh,
Okay, so what I could do now is if we want, we could just record I'm going to add an audio track. Let's make it a stereo track. And we'll just call this print verb. Okay, and this input I want to send from the group. So we're going to say group 1. If I did everything right, I'll just hit record.
All is love. Are we there yet? Oh.
And so now when I just wanted to play back just that particular file here, this will just be our So that's one way that you could just kind of print. You could also, if you use just an effect send, you could solo the tracks. And, when you do your export audio mix down, you're able to just, have your effect send that's included here, and you could render it that way. But this way I could isolate the source track from the group and just set the group as an audio input and just be able to print directly from there. So I will go back and on this particular group, I'll deactivate the plugins. There's no plugin, so I have the original audio plus the printed reversed reverb.
Are we there yet?
And that way you could actually have, multiple effects that are printed together simultaneously. So there's a couple cool little tricks you could do with that. So let me know if that works for you. My Studios 303. And it's also cool for guitar solos doing that. All right. Good to see Mark Rabin from Montana on the Hangouts. Great to see you on the Zoom get-together last Friday. And we'll be doing the Zoom get-together the last Hangout of the month. I think we'll do that. I so enjoyed kind of meeting everyone and chatting. So it was lots of fun for me. I get to meet all of you. We get to spend a lot of afternoons here together. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, every time I reopen a session, my control room preset does not remain even though I save before closing, and I have to set it every time to reopen the session. So the only times that I've seen that is, I've seen it sometimes like with like HDMI interfaces. So sometimes that will kind of trip up the audio, that kind of can change the order of the audio interface options. But, I would just out of curiosity, so it's, okay, so it's with a preset that you're doing. So, make sure that you're not starting up maybe in different sample rates. If that changes your IO configuration, maybe like from a 48K to 96K, maybe that could change the number of IOs that could kind of trip it up. But if you have a particular project that you want to email me or share with me, you could send it to, or even it doesn't even have to have data, but I could see if it kind of misbehaves on my end. But, I've seen it sometimes when, I don't know if you're starting from a template, and maybe the template is different than what you have for your particular project, and make sure it's the same sample rate that it's working with. But if you could check those things, so if your template includes the control room, and if there's no like kind of differences, like, this audio interface, this SPDIF is now going over Toslink versus ADAT, where the number of input and output channels could fluctuate, and which audio interface, that information could be helpful. So sorry about that. Must be a bummer. All right, question. Is there any way to get more chord pad presets? If not, can we change the root chord of a preset and will it populate the other pad chords automatically? So I think with the chord pads, you could make your own presets quite easily. So we want to come here. So there's a lot of, you have a good amount of chord pad presets already. So, you're going to have like your typical major minor keys. So let's just say, I'll just try gloomy. We'll see how that sounds. And let me just come over here to just an instrument track to load that up on. But, once we come here and choose, let's say, okay, I want to assign a pad. I'll just kind of play just random chord, and come here. So I'll just say assign pad from MIDI input. So now I could just, now I'm playing jazz. So, because I always need a B minor, flat 7th, flat 9th, 11th chord, so now I could, and once I'm done with that, I could come right over here and save that as my own chord pad preset. So let's say changing the root chord of the preset. So, if you want it to, come here and say, even take this chord and go through the different variations, or if you wanted it to, so those are different kind of voicing tensions, or if you want to do different inversions. And then I think also you could choose for this to, let me just go in here. So if you say I wanted it to chord voicing styles, so here you could say I just want triads, or I don't want 4-note chords or 5-note chords. So at that point, once you go into kind of the settings, so now it's just going to be a B minor chord. But click on the edit and chord voicing styles, and then go to custom, and then you could really kind of configure the note ranges, the highest notes, if you wanted to duplicate the root, if you want to fatten it up. I do want very complex 5-note chords, or I want very simple triads. I want triads with the major ninth. So you have different options there. So play around with that. I think you'll get where you want to. All right. All right. So we have Kenny Jobson just joined. So probably a while ago. Okay, so love the new supervision in Cubase 11. I would love it even more if the oscilloscope could be beat synced. Are there any plans for that? So let's go ahead and take a quick look. Just jump back to this project here quickly. So I'm not sure if it could be kind of beat synced, but we'll take a look at it here. All right, just going to revert this quickly. Or let me just take the MIDI gate off. All right. All right, so let's see. So let's get to the oscilloscope. So it doesn't look like it's you could adjust the timing of it. I'll just jump back here in the song. So I mean, you could kind of figure out the timing maybe, so but it's not tempo sync. So, but I understand where you may want it to just have it look cool and automatically be kind of synchronized. Okay. All right. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, how do I make the range selection tool automatically control my locator position in Cubase 10.5? For example, if I draw a selection using the range selection tool, I want the locators to be set at that part. So you could, there's a preference. I believe, hopefully I'll find this faster, under editing, where you could say cycle follows range selection tool. So now once that is checked, I could grab my range selection and my left and right locators will just kind of automatically follow. So that's all you had to do with that. So you just say grab the range tool and select the range, and you'll see the left and right locators just follow automatically once you have that set. So that preference again is Cubase preferences, under editing, cycle follows range selection. So enable that. I think that will do what you want. So we have a question. Is there a sense Pro Tools subscription model is driving new users over to Cubase? So we have lots and lots of new users all the time. So we haven't, I'm not sure if there's been analysis done on it, but you know, it's been good for our business. And, you know, we seem to have a lot of people that like, you know, owning their software and not leasing their, you know, like I wouldn't want to lease a bass every month. You know, kind of want to make that commitment and own the bass so no one could ever take it away from me. So, but it's, you know, we've had, and I think, you know, as they've done research, you know, a lot of people haven't been, you know, for moving to a subscription model. So, but you know, things could evolve and change. Who knows? Okay. I also love the new squasher, but when I zero all the settings so that it is having no action, Example, init state, the output is still 2-3 dB louder than when bypassed. Have I missed something? So let's take a quick look at it here. So I'll just activate my meters. So let's say I'll just put it on my master bus here. Just seeing if there's an initial state with the plugin here. So, you know, make sure also that you have, so there's a lot of variables, obviously, when you're doing this. So let's just see if I have, I think it's kind of the nature of the beast. So let's see if I come here and so, depending on like what state you're in here, how it's carving the frequencies, so, it may have some impact because, there really isn't like just a default, state, but it's probably not why you want to add it. So, so I'd say if it sounds good, that's kind of the intention, is kind of give you that edge, on your tracks. So. So question, I have an M1 Mac, is Cubase 11 compatible? So we're not, it's being investigated. There's significant performance changes under the hood. Most third-party audio interfaces, or most audio interfaces, won't work. A significant number of plugins won't work as well. So it could be a little premature. And it's kind of with every software developer that's not Apple, is kind of going through this transition. So it's a pretty significant architectural change. Okay. Okay, sorry, my timeline just kind of jumped on me. Bear with me while I find my space. Thanks for all the great questions. We're doing well in time. Okay. So I see Mike from New York just wondering if the Cubase 11 works with the new Mac M1 series computer. I'm able to run 10.5 fine. I think that there were some changes with the 11.0.1 that was just released last week. So, but it's running under Rosetta, and it's not taking advantage of, all of the new processor capabilities. So. But you could try the trial version of that. All right, so just see a comment from Mark Rabin. Greg, the quick controls lessons are super handy. I'm also thrilled with the IC Pro now that I have a phone and iPad as remotes. I have a few keystrokes I want to refine. That's great. Yeah, it's perfect for like I'm in a vocal booth and, Yeah, and one of the things I guess with the version 11 is the Groove Agent SE is fully scalable, as Jazz Dude mentioned. Thanks for mentioning that, Jazz Dude. So it's good to see Grant Nicholas on Hangout. I hope you're doing well. Hey, Greg, what's in maybe an easy way to do chord repeats? Okay, so let's say, all right, so let's say if I have a chord track. Let me see, I may have one of Gareth's songs here. Let's see if I did chord track for this. I may have. Okay, so let's say this is Gareth K's song here. If you have like, sections in the chord, if I'm understanding Grant, what you could do is, select these chords and hold down like the Alt or Option key, and then you'll be able to just make copies. So if you're like, okay, these are the chords during the verse, these are chords during the chorus, you could just kind of place them and make copies just like that, just like any other part. So you just select, hold down, drag and drop, or copy. So let's say I just wanted to copy that, move my cursor here and paste. You could just see everything like that. But if I'm misunderstanding Grant, let me know. So if that's the chord repeats that you wanted to do. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, before using Very Audio, and if you have a not so hot vocal track, does Very Audio work better if you first normalize the vocal track? It doesn't necessarily make a huge difference, I found. So if the level is like really low, if it's like, I would say like if you have amplitude that looks, something like that, it doesn't seem to detect, then I would kind of, bring that up a bit, just to kind of, have that, if it's not reading it well. But I don't think that the detection of the pitch detection is like incredibly sensitive to levels. I've never really had an instance where, but I probably haven't had super low level amplitude vocal material that I've done with Very Audio. So, but I don't think it needs to be super hot. All right, so we see we gave a daily epiphany for John Costigan, vocal doubling with formant shift. So it's a cool little trick. Okay. Sorry, you may hear the TV. My son's watching The Wonder Years in the next room. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. What's the best approach to make Melodyne on vocals instruments and then keep a version on same track, one with possible edit and other rendered, not processing Melodyne? So, what you could do if you're in a situation like that is you can say, okay, I want to take this particular track. I want to duplicate the track. Okay, and then come to your audio menu and choose to bounce selection and replace the events. Because if you don't do that, if you do edits on one, those edits can automatically be applied to the same audio file if you do any processing on it. So what I would do, and I do this often before doing like a lot of tuning, where someone, where I will just take the vocal and do a bounce selection, and I work on that and keep the original just in case they're like, oh yeah, I wanted to change this word, or I didn't like this. Can you edit this? And it's something that you really wanted to do editing before and you need to go back. It's just 2 mouse clicks and the original file's intact. And you could actually just come here in visibility and hide that particular track if you wanted to. And work with this one, but know that you always have it kind of in the background and accessible. Okay. So a question: we have a 2 to 4 bar bass loop, and we want to do transpose automate without transpose track. How would you do that? So if it's let's say here I have like just a little bass part. I'll just play this. Okay, so what you could do is just come here. So let's say I'll just take this bass part. Let me just get to somewhere there's maybe a little more action. All right, so, and you could just select, with like the range tool and, go to, let's say our processes, and I'll just do pitch shift. So at this point, I will just say, let's transpose that, down 1. And that will transpose that. I could come here and, okay, I want to transpose this up 2. And now as I just kind of play, you could just kind of, so you could just select different sections and just kind of do different transpositions. You could also just probably even a faster way is to say, okay, I just wanted to cut these particular phrases. And if you don't want to use the transpose track, you could come right over here, say let's transpose up 2. Take this, let's transpose down 3. So as we play. And now this will be down. And you could just do it straight from the info line as well. So, and that works for kind of audio and MIDI. So, so as you see from fifth quarter, hey, late to the party here. Not sure if it's been covered. Is there a way to import an audio file loop to the project and have Cubase match the pitch key of the track progressions as well? So, when you drop a loop in, it could match the tempo of Cubase. But if you want it to go to, like, let's say if you're going to different loops, a lot of the drum loops will have the tempo kind of indicated. So, once you drop that in, the tempo can be indicated. So you can match the tempo with that, but it doesn't automatically change the project tempo based upon the tempo of the loop. Rather, the loop will match the tempo of the project once it's in musical mode. And sometimes, if you have a loop that's in C major and you say, okay, I want it to be C minor, a lot of that stuff doesn't work so well. So, while it may seem like it's doing some stuff, often it's not musically correct and kind of doesn't sound so good. So it's not really intended for that, but you could drag and drop and have it comply to, the root key that you could set here, but it's not necessarily going to go, okay, I want this to go from Aeolian to Dorian modes, you know. Okay. So question, I don't know if it's a true question or not, but just asking, how can you do the coin effect to audios in Cubase? When you drop a coin, it starts to drop faster and faster. Maybe a chopper plugin. All right, so let's see if I can find a kind of a coins or kind of a sound effect here quickly. Okay, so let's see if we could. Okay, so let's say I just want to take just a portion. So I'll just take this audio file in here. And if I wanted to, you know, you could probably even, for that type of effect that you want, so say, you know, you probably could come over here and even use like the multi-tap delay. So if I wanted to come here, so I could say I wanted this delay. Let's make it quarter note delay. And on this, I wanted it to pitch shift. So I could add effects. And we could add a module within the plugin. So let's just have it pitch shifter. Okay. So let's see what happens with this. Okay, let me just try that in the loop effect instead. So this way you could put effects on the delays themselves. So if you wanted to kind of play around with that type of stuff as well, so you could let me just try pitch shifter as well. But you know, so within this particular plugin, so you could do like some different effects like that as well. But you know, within the and you can make it, so say we put it in tape mode, or we could go crazy. So let's see what this does. So, but I think, so some stuff like that. So I haven't heard the term coin effect before, but hopefully that's kind of what you were envisioning or hearing. So. Okay, so I see, hi Greg, why is the sample trim mode disabled in slice mode? So, you know, if you're in slice mode, so let's go take a look at this. Okay, so let's say I have a sampler track here and I want to just drag and drop. Okay, so all right, so why the sampler trim mode is disabled in slice mode. So, if we go to slice mode here, that's going to determine the transients, but you could actually come here and manually put in transients. So at this point, I think it's just hold down like the Alt or Option key. So you could kind of choose, where it is. But once you're here, it's kind of really, intended to be like, a little different. So when you're kind of selecting just a portion of that, let's say you wanted to just, work with this in the slice mode. So say I want to go from here to here, your trim is going to be, I would tend to do that first here and then kind of do the slice. But, if you need to, put the slices where you want, just make sure that you put that in the mode for manual, and then you can put the slices in just by holding down the Alt or Option key. Okay. So just saying Millard also mentioning a delay effect and automate the delay time increasingly shorter. So you could also do that on the, if we jump back to the delay time, but you could give that a try. That's a good suggestion, Millard, about doing the delay time as well. Okay, so from Mark Rabin, this has got two questions. If I import a MIDI drum library, what's the best way to do this? I don't want to overwrite stuff. How to get it show in media tab? Anyone else? So if it's a MIDI drum library, so if it depends what kind of file format it is. So if it's going to be MIDI files, when you go over here to, let's say, your loops and browsers, you could, you'll probably see, let's just come here to like your file. Let me just, so, depending on the format that it is. So a lot of MIDI drum libraries are actually set up as standard MIDI files. So I'm going to blow off Jeff Berlin on the phone and call him back after to hang out for you guys. He was my idol as when I was in high school as a bassist. So I'm just going to tell him I'll call him back in just a minute. So. Bear with me just right quick. All right, sorry about this. Yeah, Jeff is one of the biggest reasons why I study music. All right, so let's say if you wanted to go to your file browser, you could look for wherever the MIDI files are on your system. I don't think I have a collection of MIDI files anymore. I'll see if I could maybe see if I could find something. So let's. And you could store these MIDI files and be able to kind of drag and drop the MIDI files. You could also, once you go searching for, you could go into Media Bay here and search, for your file types. Before we do that, let me just jump back here. All right, so once you're here, So say if you go to your libraries, you could also um, just have it search for MIDI files. And then once you have MIDI files, and you could choose kind of any location where they may be, you could also do it from the known file browser here, and and then just kind of drag and drop those MIDI files directly into Timeline. So if it is something like from Groove Agent, what you're able to do, if it's a Groove Agent library or a pattern in Groove Agent, I'll show you that. So different instruments can do this as well. So this will allow you to drag library like MIDI files. So sometimes the terminology MIDI file could be sometimes a bit confusing because it could be just MIDI information. There's a standard MIDI file, but I could take patterns here and drag these directly onto the timeline, just like so. So it's not going to necessarily overwrite stuff, but within the full media bay, you could also kind of search for anywhere that you have the MIDI files and select it and drag and drop from the full media bay, from the media bay on the right hand side here. And if you always are going to the same folder and you're like, I don't want to do this navigation like 100 times a day, that'll drive me crazy, just right click on it and click on add favorites. And then you could go to your favorites folder, and then you'll see all of your favorite locations, so you don't have to go kind of directory diving looking for the particular one. So I see a question: does anyone use a Control Z shortcut key? So yeah, I mean it's a really common one for editing. I find like I have a CC121 controller, and it has a foot switch input. I find it when I'm like in editing mode, it's a assignable thing for your foot switch that if I'm doing tons of editing on something where I need to undo, redo, undo, I will actually just have undo assigned to my foot switch. So I have that set up periodically on like real intense editing stuff. So just to fire off the undo command, but you could set it up on like IC Pro as well, so you could undo your recording if you need to, stuff like that. All right, so to see how to denoise an audio file with high quality. So we do have a tool called Spectral Layers, and this is sold separately. And let me see if I have just a file that I might be able to work with here. So the Spectral Layers Elements, I believe, has some of the noise reduction, but I know that the Pro does. And it's pretty effective. So let's say if I want to do a quick audio file here, I'll just go to okay, so let's say if I have something like this. All right, so I'm going to just go to the audio and extensions, and let's launch the big gun Spectral Layers. So what I'm going to do is just kind of find a a bit of the noise floor kind of isolated by itself here. So we'll go ahead and zoom. So what I want to do is I'm going to just kind of select like where we have not a lot of harmonic content, where I see just a lot of the noise. So I'm going to take that and let's come over here to process, and we'll say, let's just do this as registered noise. And now what I want to do now is just do noise reduction throughout the whole file. And so just do this a couple times here. So, but if you're, let me just see if I could redo the noise print. But so if you come there and just kind of find that particular noise print, I'll just go to my extensions here again. Let's see if I can find a better. So just try one more time here. But once you kind of do that, and I have gotten like really pretty astonishing results if you just give us one more shot here. But. So versus. So you could kind of utilize the spectral layers for that, and you go and you could get some really great results for that. All right. So it's just see how to create more than one mix console. So depending on your version of Cubase, like I think Cubase Pro, you could have up to 3 different mix consoles. So you could just kind of choose them here if you have kind of a lighter version that may not, you may not have more than one mix console within there. So. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. It's got an email from composer Paul Haslinger. So incredibly talented guy. Okay, just reading through comments. Okay, so here's a question. When I use Groove Agent and put a kick and snare and send it to different buses and outputs, when I right click on chorus to show the snare automation, when I draw, It smiles, doesn't let you draw a curve. Okay, so I'm sorry, you said you maybe sent it in. So sorry if I didn't see it. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so I'm going to send this to, let's say, my kick and snare to different buses. Okay, so I'm going to now send this to my kick to output 2 and my snare to output 3. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's. All right, so it's all right. So it says, so send it to different buses and outputs. When I right click on course to show snare automation, when I draw it, it smites but doesn't let you draw a curve. Okay, so let's. Okay, so let's say I have my kicks and let me just mute this track. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so I'm just so when I right click on course to show the snare automation, when I draw it smites, doesn't let you draw a curve. Okay, so I'm just so use a kick and snare and send it to different buses and outputs. When I right click on course to show the snare automation, when I draw, okay, so let's say I'm in my snare automation here. Okay. So it says it doesn't let you draw a curve. So let me switch to my curve tool. So I'm not sure if the course is like course tuning. Or if it's effects that you're using. We just see if it's maybe one of the effects. Okay, so when I draw it, it smites. Okay, right click on course to show the snare automation when I draw. So So I'm not sure if the course is a particular parameter. You know, sometimes if you're not able to draw in, I mean, what I've seen. And I'm sorry if I missed your question. I haven't. You know, sorry if I missed it. Um, but let's say if maybe you have Snap turned on, and let's say you have it set to bar, but it seems like all the curves are kind of working just as expected here. So if you could maybe rephrase your question, or if you want to send it to me to Club Cubase at Steinberg.de, I'll kind of keep my eye out for it in the Hangouts. So if you're listening to this, send it again. Sorry about that. Okay, so question. I have Howling in full version and want to use a custom reverb impulse with a Reverence built-in effect. I can do this with Reverence in Cubase, but how can I do this in Howling? So I'm not sure if it's designed for loading up a custom impulse, but I'll take a quick look to see. But I'm inclined to say that's really intended to give you the impulses that, for presets, so that you have those for, primarily like for orchestral stuff. So yeah, so I don't think it's intended to allow you to have your own impulses. So you might just have to do that inside of Cubase, but I could pass that along to the Halion team as well. Okay, so just see sometimes when I go to normalize audio, it drops the gain down to 0 automatically instead of automatically raising it to 0 dB. It didn't always do this. How would I change this setting? Okay, so let's take a look. All right, I'll just drag a loop in quickly. All right, so okay, so let's say I auto apply that. So it might be pretty normalized already. Let me just. And also make sure that it could also, let's just take a look. It could be depending on the levels that you've recorded. So let me just take this to a group and just record it something that's level, because it may, depending on the file, it may already kind of be at 0 dB. So I'm going to add a group channel to the selected track. All right, so I'm just going to adjust my fader here. Okay, so I'll just record just a little segment here. Okay, so now I'm going to have this audio file, and I want to normalize. So when I have this set to, I'll just undo this. So let's normalize it again, and I'll just take it off. So if I come here, let's say I put it to 0 dB, it's kind of, make sure that you don't have, like, you know, because there's two choices. You have the loudness normalization as well as the peak normalization. So let's say if I, you know, but it seems to kind of be working as expected on my end. So. Okay, so we have a question. Can project folders simply be moved to another directory? Yes, but make sure that the next time that you open the project, that you open the file from the project within the new directory. Otherwise, you may get a bunch of messages saying, "I can't find this audio file," and, you know, locate it for me. So just be aware of that the project file, unless you save it afterwards, may still be referencing the location of audio files, you know, from the previous location. So, and the best trick to do if you wanted to save it to new location of a pretty fail safe way is just to, you know, select your project here and go to file and just choose to, you know, backup project, and this will move it to a new folder. You choose the folder, all the files are needed for that will automatically be moved over. But if you just move it to a different directory and you open it from the first, then it will, you know, you could get some messages, but if you open the project from the new location, you know, it should automatically find the files and the audio files as long as they're kind of within the same kind of, you know, hierarchy. So hey guys, is there 1176 or LA2A style compressor? You know, so you could really, they're not directly modeled, but you could get those types of vibes. You know, check out even in the channel strip, if you go to the compressor, you could have, you know, tube compressor. So that looks like, you know, expected tube compressors, and also vintage compressors. So if you're going for that type of sound and vibe, you could really kind of check out some of those, and that will get you there pretty quickly. Okay, so we have a question. Is there any way that I could see an output in the inspector channel for an instrument tracks like you can see in the audio tracks and MIDI tracks? Okay, so let's come over here and we look here. We can see our output routing for that particular, let's say this track. We can see this is going to our stereo out. And let's add, I think we have an instance of Halley in here. So with this, so this is our instrument track. And now as soon as you kind of click here, you could see this stereo out. It's not necessarily from the inspector tab, but here you can kind of see, okay, this is Hallian. It's going out of our stereo out, or if you wanted to send it to a group. But so you could see it from, you know, for instrument tracks, kind of the audio capabilities there, but not from the inspector exactly. Let me just see if it's, so we have this going out to, and I'll just, yeah, but if you just come over here, when you hit the E, you could see it right there. So it'll just be an extra mouse click. So, all right, we see Gareth is on his dinner break. All right, we see comment from Don Arbus, Cubase the best dot ever. So it's great. I enjoy it. So hi there. Can you tell me a way to copy and paste tracks across projects? I have several projects consisting of just guitars and a Superior Drummer VST MIDI track. I want to combine them into one project. So really the easiest way to do this, I mean, you could drag and drop, like, you know, files, you know, so if you say, okay, here's my guitar part, you know, I could just drag and drop it into other projects, you know, inactive or active. But what I would tend to do, probably the smarter way of doing it might be where you could actually just get to your file menu and choose import tracks from project. And then once we come over here, I could select a project. Then I could, you know, okay, I want to import, you know, these tracks. And I want the events, or I don't want the events. I want the channel and the inspector settings, or maybe I don't want the automation. And then I could just take those particular tracks and import it into my project to make kind of a master compilation of different ideas to create your song. Okay, question. Sometimes the quantize doesn't line up when I hit Q and I have the grid set correctly and all the right buttons pressed. What could be causing the quantize issue? So I haven't really seen that happen. So let's say if I wanted to do a new project here. And thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so let's say if we're here, and I just had a whole bunch of, I'll just add an instrument track quickly. Okay, so if I wanted to quantize these to quarter notes, so, you know, sometimes I've seen people, you know, have certain files selected, but here, let's say I want to quantize it to whole notes for all these. So when I have, let's say, all of my notes selected and I hit Q, that will kind of quantize accordingly. So make sure that maybe some notes are selected and some aren't. I've seen people kind of run into that issue where, you know, it could be like these notes are selected and maybe they're off screen and you go to hit Q and it doesn't look like anything is happening, but it's really just these particular notes that were quantized. But if you have a project where it's not working, please feel free to share it with me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so I just see it says CC and mixer faders. So, if you wanted to, so I'm not sure if that's controlling the mixer faders via MIDI CC. So, but if that's the question, let's say I'll just come here and add, some audio tracks. So I could, if you wanted to have like, your track quick controls, we could enable these so that, when I move, if I have these turned on for all of my tracks and we could save it this way in a template. It's a pretty common thing to do. So once I have this set up, we could do our track quick controls. So if I wanted to have this set up so one quick control is controlling whatever track I'm on, we could do it like that. If you wanted to have multiple sliders that are doing, like 8 sliders that do 8 channels at a time, we could go to the generic MIDI remote. And we can say, okay, MIDI. So let's say I want to click on learn. So say MIDI controller 1. And that's going to control, let's say VST mixer, audio 1. And we'll choose volume. And I select this. So this is the incoming MIDI message at the top. And this is what it's going to control. So let's say, okay, this will be VST mixer, audio 1, volume. So let's make this the VST mixer, audio 2, volume, and this is probably how it's set up by default. So I'm going to just, and now once I have that set up and I could just kind of leave it, I could just, come right over here and just move my fader and control. So you could do it kind of via quick controls, or you could do it via the generic MIDI remote if you want to control the mixer faders with MIDI CC. So. Okay, so I just see key editor CC to associate with editor fader from mixer. So if it's in a MIDI key editor, so let's say if I wanted this to control like MIDI CCs to control this particular instrument track here, you could go to your CC automation setup. And we could say, okay, for MIDI parts, let's say when I record MIDI stuff, we could just change this to automation tracks instead of to CC data. And now when I go to draw in like volume control here, this actually will just show up as our volume. So when we come here, I could just say, okay, we're going to, you know, so then as you draw in volume here, this is actual automation as opposed to CC data. So you could take your main volume and actually have that be, consolidate MIDI CC. So again, what you want to do is just go to your CC automation setup, and we could choose that, as you record in CC7, that it writes automation for the instrument track. So. All right, good to see Sable Winters on the Hangout. All right, so we have Jeff Liebig from upstate New York. Good to have you on Hangout. Okay, so we have a question. I know you can select all inserts by pressing E with Alt Option plus Shift click, but how can you close them all with one click? So let's take a look, see if we can figure it out. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to, so I have all these. Okay, so if you want to open all of these, I think it's just. And let me see if there's, I think there may be just a key command for this. Okay, so I think under the Windows menu, there's kind of, let's say, show hide plugin. So I'm going to assign a keyboard shortcut for it. Okay, so let's say if we go to the Windows menu, you could close all plugin windows right there, or you could just Windows to close all plugins. So if I hold down Alt Shift, so let's say, oh, sorry, wrong keyboard shortcut. So if I have all these plugin windows open, just go to your window menu to close all plugin windows, or you could just have your keyboard shortcut set up as well. And here we could see, like from previous, we could now see kind of the automation data for your volume automation kind of written directly in the part. So. Okay, we see Pablo's getting dinner as well. So how can you copy paste inserts from a track to another not using Mix Console? All right, so So I don't know what you're doing without the mix console. I mean, it's easy enough in the mix console to do. You could save it as a preset. Um, just seeing if there's. So I don't know a way to do it, but in the mix console, there's a couple ways you could do it, like in a lower zone mixer. I mean, you could save it as a track preset, but I don't think that makes it faster or slower. So if you're in your inserts here, you could just kind of select the tracks and drag it over and say, just like that. So it's a pretty easy way, but it is using the mix console. But you could do it in a lower zone mix console pretty easily. Okay, I make tracks around 200 BPM and sample them in another DAW because my instruments are 32-bit. So I then load them into Cubase, and all at once my sample BPM is not correct. Okay. So I'm not sure how you're getting the information, if you're transferring it over as MIDI or if you're transferring it over as audio. But the tempo stamp is going to be kind of created probably in the other program. And just because it is 32-bit, you could always, download an earlier version of Cubase, I think like 8.5 or earlier. And you can still run your 32-bit plugin, so that might be a better workflow for you. Just as your Cubase 11 license or Cubase 10 license will run previous versions, so if you need to run 32 BPM. But generally, if the sample BPM is not correct, it's probably, see if you imported it into other programs, like maybe back into that program if that works. So, but I don't, but generally, if Cubase is pretty good about reading the tempo stamps, but not all tempo stamps are created equally. I found over the years. So we see a question from Daniel: how can someone get the Zoom? So what we did is before Christmas is we actually kind of just so we could meet, because probably a lot of us have spent a lot of time together in the Hangouts. We did kind of like a meet and greet Zoom. And then a lot of people liked doing that, so we're doing it the last Hangout of the month. We'll end it like an hour earlier than our usual 4 hours, and we'll post kind of a Zoom link. So whatever the last Hangout. So it'd probably be February 26th, I believe. So like 3 weeks from today, I think. So. Okay. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, my timeline just kind of jumped on me. All right, just scroll back. So just see from Captenergy Music, I agree with the statement. Most people want to own their software. Some companies have to learn the hard way that no one wants to lease their software, though, I guess. So, and I see from Sable, I prefer ownership over pouring money into the same software each month of a year for a lifetime. That's a good point. It's nice to have your stuff paid off. Yeah. Okay, so I see a question. Is a retrospective recording for MIDI able to detect the tempo I'm playing and adjust my session to match the tempo I'm coming from Ableton? And it does this so easily. Um, so I mean, it doesn't do it automatically, but you can do like a tempo detection of the MIDI. So let's say if I have um, just a quick instrument track here. So let me just load something up. All right, so let's say I'm just kind of doing this, and I'm just going. And then I hit my retrospective record. All right, then it's automatically going to place it directly there. So, and at this point, if I want to look at it, I could just say, okay, we want to do just a quick tempo detection of this. So I just get a project to tempo detection and just say analyze. And now it's automatically, figured out the tempo from what I played, or you could quantize it, so it may be a two-step process. Okay, so just see question problem. I have an external instrument which has some chord samples I want to use. I need the possibility to recognize the input chords, 3 notes, and route it to a specific single note. Okay, so it has some chord samples. So if it has chord samples, it's probably not transmitting so if it's like you hit a note and it's playing a chord, that chord is probably not in the MIDI domain if it's samples. I'm not sure if it's the particular music or the particular sound or instrument. So I need the possibility to recognize the input chords, 3 notes, and route it to a specific single note. So I think it's going to be a limitation of the external instrument. So if it's not transmitting that via MIDI, it's hard to figure out what samples they're using and what chords they're using if the device itself is only triggering one MIDI note. But if you could maybe, Marcus, let us know what exact instrument. All right. Hi, Greg. I think this is a feature request. Is there a way to make the mixer only show the inputs assigned to the selected group or effects channels or spill function? So let's say if I'm in a project here. Okay, so let's say if I'm on, I'll just pull up maybe even a better project to show this. Sorry. Okay, so let's say I have a bunch of these tracks that are kind of all feeding. So here I have okay, so let's say I wanted to go to this reverb channel. So it's not necessarily like a spill, but once you open up the channel, you could see all the channels that are feeding it. So, and if I go to, let's say, a group channel, so say I go to my group tracks, and here I'm in my keyboards group. I could now just go to the keyboards group, and then you can see 4 sources are going into the keyboards. And if I wanted to go to, let's say, my stereo out, I could feed, okay, here's all my guitars. And then you could just navigate and say, okay, I want to go to this guitar, and then this guitar is feeding 2 targets. So, okay, this guitar is going to be feeding in effects as well as our guitar. So you can navigate quite easily without necessarily having it, migrate down to the mix console. So if you need to just get to different spots, it's, quite easy to do just from the top, because you can see the sources, and the sources will then, feed, the groups. And so I go to my drum group. The drum group has 2 targets, so that's going to be, feeding to my stereo out as well as an effects channel. And, so at this point, you could just kind of navigate quite easily to see the different routing. All right, so I know we had some questions that were sent in, so let's get to those before we run out of time. So we had a question, how to change the pitch and speed of audio together, kind of like is almost as if you were slowing down like old samples. So if I have, let's say, just this particular audio file here, let's say, so if I wanted to do this, I could go to audio, and then if we go to our processes, we could say, okay, let's go to pitch shift. And we have this function for time correction. So if I wanted to like slow down, let's say to, go down a, let's say a perfect fourth or whatever. So now I could come over here, and as we listen to it, the audio will get longer, and the pitch will change. So if I undo that, you'll see that the audio file will get shorter. So that way we could change the audio and the pitch simultaneously. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to set a project so that when you select a track, the relevant instrument UI loads? Numerous occasions and tracks using the same UI, I've been accidentally tweaking the wrong instrument. So what I think it would be annoying if every time you, selected a particular, part that the instrument automatically loaded up, but you can assign it to a keyboard shortcut. So let's find some of the MIDI parts here. So, as we go, to different MIDI instruments, there's this function here, which is the edit VST instrument, and you could assign that to a keyboard shortcut. So if you go to your key commands, you could say edit VST instrument. So I just mapped it to Command Option Shift V. So anytime that I'm on a particular instrument track here, I can say, okay, I want it to, here this is going to Pad Shop. So I could just say, and that will kind of automatically open up the instrument for that particular track for you. So you could just kind of come right over here, just select that and assign that keyboard shortcut. But I think every time you switch a track, if the instrument opened up, that would be like annoying pretty quickly. All right, we also had a question about if there's a way using the Project Logical Editor to take an event and we could kind of cut the length of it to the cursor position, but how could we cut the beginning of the event? So let's say if I wanted to make an edit and I wanted this event to cut to right where the cursor is from the beginning or the end. And we could do this, it's under the edit. And if we go to range, you'll see cut head and cut tail. So if I say cut head, that event basically cut to right where the cursor was. And if we choose cut tail, the end of it will automatically cut right to where that cursor is and leave the beginning where it is. Okay, we got the next one. All right, so we had this from Johnny Diaz. How can I change the sound of the click track to a kick drum from Groove Agent or other sources and print them into an actual audio track that I can manage afterwards? So I think I may have had something kind of set up for this already. So thanks for all the wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learned a tip or trick. And if you learned something, make sure you hit the like button, and that if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. And you can be notified of future Hangouts. We'll be doing another one on Tuesday, starting at the same time, 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. All right, so let's say I have just a click track going on, and so I have my click track. So if I wanted to, we could go to the metronome. There's a couple of different options. So if you want to go to your metronome setup, here you have different click sounds. So there's kind of a default click sound. So if I wanted to come here, again, transport to metronome setup. So we could say, okay, if we wanted to change our click sound, there's different you could have your own audio files and samples that you could drag and drop in. You could also just use, different presets for click sounds. So if you want it, or if you wanted like kind of more like a Yuri click, you could do that, or wood block. So you have these different sounds that you could use. Now, if let's say I want it like this sound and these sounds could obviously be customized, and I wanted to take that particular sound and I'll go to my project menu and go to signature track, and I get to say render audio click between left and right locators. Then that's been recorded as an audio file. If I was using Groove Agent, like kind of using like a sample within Groove Agent, I could go to my transport, and let's go to the metronome setup, and I wanted to not use an audio click, but to use a MIDI click. And our click sounds, we wanted to route this to, let's say, Groove Agent. So I could now hit play, and let's say I'll just... Okay, so I will... Let's just quickly load up. Let's see if I have Groove Agent loaded up here. So, okay, so I'm just going to load up a quick Groove Agent SE. Okay, so if I wanted like a rim shot or any type of sound, I could come over here. Let's play. And I'm going to just route in the metronome setup the MIDI click sounds, and let's send this to so let's say I wanted that as my click. So what I could do now, if it's being routed out to Groove Agent, I could just kind of go back, and instead of rendering it, since it's being kind of sent to a different device, I could go to the project, to signature track, and I'll say render MIDI click between the left and right locators. So it's now made this a MIDI click. It's going to now play that MIDI click out. And if I wanted to render that as an audio file, I would just go and do a render in place. And at this point, it will just render that, and that will be my click track from Groove Agent, just using those sounds. All right, maybe I have time for one more question. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope everyone's learned something. All right, we see Gareth is back from dinner, and he missed his free brand new computer sponsored by Intel. So, all right. Okay, see, we get one more quick question in so I don't run over. All right, so we see I see Daniel asking which one is better, Cubase 11 or 10? 11, so more stuff, so cost the same. Yeah, so I just see a question. Will there be, what's the Zoom code? So we'll just I'll post the Zoom code in the chat field before the next on the last hangout of the month. I believe it's the 26th. So I see quickly, how do you use the scale function in Cubase 11? Same like Logic Pro. So I don't know what Logic is doing with that, but if you want to, have so maybe I'll start with that next time, just because we're running out of time. But we did it in the last hangout, so if you want to go to look for the topic index. But with that, we're just about out of time, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone on Tuesday for the next hangout. And if you learned something, make sure you hit the like button, as well as subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. I want to thank everyone for the great questions, and we will see everyone in about 4 days. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.